Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Escape the Board podcast. As always, I'm your host, Connor Slagowski, and my co-host,
Charles Holm. Welcome back, guys. Today we are going to be doing a quick overview of one of our personal favorite games, Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
Yeah, this game is remarkable. Honestly, this is one of the first big box games we got into. Charles ended up playing it back in high school, right?
I don't know if it was high school, but definitely my brother picked it up around that time, yeah.
And then, he picked it up, and ever since, we have just been, it's a staple at our table.
It is, yeah. We keep going back to it because it has so much versatility. And one thing that I can say for it that you don't necessarily get with a lot of big box games, while there are a lot of rules, the rules follow a very consistent pattern. And once you learn them, it's easy to learn. It's easy to just kind of step into all the new things that happen in this game.
Yeah. So the box we actually have here is of the third edition of this game. There are obviously first and second editions as well. That every new release of this game, the mechanics work just a little differently. This version in particular, it works on a story system where you have certain cards that determine the haunt as the game goes on.
Yeah, so the way the Betrayal has always worked is that there are a couple of adventurers, is not necessarily the right word, but there's a couple of
characters.
There's characters exploring kind of this mysterious haunted mansion, right?
Right.
And eventually something spooky happens, and one thing or another, but usually there's some kind of monster or one of the characters decides that it's time to attack and destroy all the other people that are exploring the house, right?
Yeah. Let's take a step back and explain what the game, for those that have never heard of this game.
Yeah.
What is the game of Betrayal?
It's a game of betrayal.
It is a game of betrayal.
Yeah,
so Betrayal is played in, like a lot of games, it's played in two phases.
Yes.
Each phase has multiple turns, obviously. So the first phase is you and your companions, as Charles mentioned, are discovering this mansion that it's completely new. Mechanically, you start with 3 tiles on the game. So it is a tile placement game. If you caught our mechanics video that covered tile placement, we mentioned Betrayal. And then as you explore this mansion, every room you walk into is a new exploration, which is part of the reason the game plays so differently every time.
Definitely one of the reasons. The other reason is because each of these different rooms has different
mechanical
things.
Events.
There's events, there's items, there's even like special artifacts that you can pick up. They're called omens. And as you discover each of these, it really changes the way the game plays. And specifically the omens, depending on what order you're picking them up and how many you pick up, really change drastically the second phase of the game.
Yeah. So as you're discovering these omens, as you explore this mansion, each omen instigates a dice roll. And the dice in this game are very unique. They are
6-sided dice, but normally a 6-sided dice will say 1, 2, 3,
1 through
4,
6.
5, 6, right? Well, these dice have 2 2s, 2 1s, and 2 blank spots. So the highest you can roll on a single dice is a 2.
I'm not finding the dice immediately.
So for anyone watching, we do have the game here just for a little bit of a visual stimulus. Specifically, there are several pieces that we keep in a separate box.
Oh, you're right.
Because
I forget that this is one of those games.
This is third edition. We've got a couple of expansions going on here. And it's not realistic to get everything in one box. And also it helps us to kind of keep some of our game pieces organized with not just this, but some other games.
Yeah.
To kind of separate them into like tackle boxes. We buy clear tackle boxes, just like Walmart or wherever.
Yeah, it makes organizing your games quite easy. We actually might cover that show those in a future episode to kind of give people an idea. That could be a full episode on how to organize your games, or
we'll do an organization or pro tips for becoming a board game gamer. Video. Anyway, that's down the line.
Back on track. So each omen instigates a dice roll, and then on a dice roll of 6 or higher,
depending on the edition.
That's fair.
So in 3rd edition, they changed it to every omen that has been collected adds 1 dice to the dice pool.
Yep.
And if you roll 6 or higher, it starts the 2nd phase. In 1st edition, what they did is you roll a flat. I think you roll a flat 6 dice. It's been a while since we played. It's been
quite a while.
But what you're trying to do is roll lower than the number of omens that have been collected.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, each like we mentioned before, each version plays differently. In 3rd edition, every omen you find adds 1 die to the die pool. A roll of 6 or higher starts the haunt, and then you enter phase 2 of the game, where in 3rd edition, at the beginning of each game, you draw a story card that kind of explains why you're looking into this mansion. And then based on the omen that you pick, that determines what haunt that you get. Whereas in earlier editions, there were just these huge books.
Well, the books are still huge. Specifically, there was a chart on the first page of the haunt book that you would use, and depending on what room you found what omen in, that would tell you what haunt it is.
Yeah, and I really liked that version of figuring out the haunt.
Especially since some of the haunts require some rooms to be up. And let's say that I have a haunt that says, okay, well, I need to have the, altar or something present. Well, that haunt is only available if you found the omen in the altar room.
Yeah.
Right? But now we have the same situation in 3rd edition where you don't necessarily have the altar room even present on the board at the start of that haunt.
Yeah.
So it creates a little bit more of a setup in some scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. But then once the haunt is revealed, like Charles mentioned earlier, there are times that players, whoever revealed the haunt, whoever plays the oldest character, whoever is the oldest at the table, each haunt is different.
Without pulling out actual numbers, I would say probably about 80% of the haunts have a betrayer. One of the characters at the table turns bad and starts attacking people. Now, of that portion where there's a betrayer, I'd say probably about half of them, it's the person that picked up the omen. That revealed the omen. And then the other half of the time, it's a very specific person. Like you were saying, maybe it's the oldest person playing. And when we say person, we mean character, not player. Yeah. Either it's the oldest character on the board, or maybe it's whoever's closest to the exit.
Right.
Yeah.
There are a select few other haunts that are just a monster showing up. A good chunk of the time when there is a betrayer, there are also other monsters added
very
for
frequent.
their turn. And like I said, like we've mentioned, it's such a unique playthrough every time. Even if you play the same haunt, and odds are if you play it enough, you're going to play the same haunt. The mansion gets built out differently. The players are all playing differently. You can be playing a different character at that time. It's the level of replayability on this game is staggering.
Oh Lord! And when you say replayability, we've been talking about haunts. Generally speaking, there's about I think 100 haunts,
especially in the older editions. I don't know if there's quite that many in 3rd edition, but I think
1st edition started you off with 50 haunts, and then the expansion
added another
50, and then 3rd edition, I'm not quite sure, but they probably dialed it back to about 50.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just a ton of different scenarios to play through, and then depending on how the mansion is built, each of those scenarios play differently, and depending on who is the betrayer, if there even is one, changes drastically how that second phase is played as well.
Yeah. It's so much replayability, and I think that's why it gets pulled out so much.
Yeah.
That's
that and the theme. It's really good storytelling.
It is. It's a fun. So if you're a fan of tabletop RPGs, I'm not going to say that Betrayal is a one-to-one comparison, but there is a lot of thematic, story, enthralling elements when it comes to this game. It brings you into this world. You are this adventurer exploring this mansion, and your friend turns on you, and you, like, in the second phase of the game, your friend, whoever the betrayer is, if there is one, has to take their own book out of the room to figure out what they need to be doing for their turn. They legitimately turn on you.
Now, thematically, of course, this plays a lot like a lot of horror movies that you might watch, where a group of friends just wander into like a cabin in the woods.
Right.
And I mean, from the very beginning of the game, one thing that's evident is there is no leaving the mansion. You cannot escape. There is a front door, and you can't go through it.
Yeah.
In fact, actually, as you're building the mansion out, one thing that we like to do at our table frequently is we like to block off the front door with like a wraparound hallway or something. So like, even if we could leave through the front door, it doesn't go anywhere.
In fact, I believe we've actually moved. So there's a mystical elevator tile.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we've moved that tile directly in front of the door to get into another room.
Yeah. But yeah, so from the very beginning, you're not able to escape the mansion. And then as it plays through, obviously spooky things are happening. You hear clunks around the mansion. There's weird stuff gurgling up from the floorboards or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can find secret passages. You can discover dolls that...
Creepy dolls.
Creepy dolls. There's events where you feel like you're going insane. And so in these events specifically, a lot of them require a die roll in order for something to happen. You could have damage dealt to you, or you could get a boon from it, completely depending on how you roll. And that's another thing that makes this gameplay so unique, is the dice rolling of it makes everything a bit more random. You can run into the same event and have a completely different outcome.
Now, you did mention a minute ago RPGs, and of course, my mind obviously goes to TTRPGs, tabletop, like
RPGs.
TTRPGs.
You said RPGs.
RPGs. But when we're talking about dice rolls here, one thing that plays a common factor is stats. So you have 12 characters to pick from. You have double-sided tiles, so there are 6 tiles. Every tile gives you 2 different options. So generally speaking, with just a base set of the game, you can play with up to 6 people. And then each of these characters are going to have different starting stats and different like minimum and maximum stats, because this game does let you improve and decrease stats as you go along.
Yeah.
But there are 2 mental stats, and that is knowledge and sanity. And then there's 2 physical stats, and that's might and speed.
Yes.
So those 4 stats that you're working with, 12 different options to start with. So maybe if you're running like the priest or something, he has a higher sanity. So if something crazy happens and you have to make a sanity roll, you're more likely to succeed. Or let's say that you're playing Flash. I forget his last name, but he's a runny dude.
He's the speedy guy.
He's the speedy guy. And something jumps out at you and you have to make a speed roll to get away. He's more likely to succeed.
Yeah.
Where the priest might fail because he's kind of elderly and not as fast.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, like, if you play the game, it'll make more sense. But with these stats, the number on your stat determines the amount of dice you roll.
Yes.
It's really super easy to learn this game because everything does work so well together. So
if I remember right, I think the stats range from 1 to 7. Now, no one starts off with a 1 on anything. No one starts off with a 7 on anything. But as you improve, does it go up to 8?
I think it goes up to 8.
I think it goes up to 8. But as you improve, you can get better and better. And some people just are never going to be able to get an 8 in something. Like the priest cannot get an 8 in speed. His speed does not go up to 8. I think it stops at like a 6 or something.
Yep.
But his sanity, I don't think ever drops down to a 1 either. I think his minimum is like a 3.
Maybe. Something like that.
I play the priest a lot because I like running the same characters. It comes up a lot in this game.
Sanity is huge in this game because it is horror-based.
Right.
But there's also characters like
there's a little
Broski,
girl, and then there's Broski.
Joseph Brosif something.
He's the strong guy.
Yeah, he is the strength guy, and having him in a lot of haunts is key because he runs in, he punches, and he gets out.
Yeah, when you're facing off against those monsters in the second phase, it's good to have someone with a little bit of strength behind their head.
But if you're up against a betrayer that is literally just trying to melts your mind, he's not going to do you any good.
Right, or
which
like
is
a ghost or something where it's constantly attacking you with sanity.
Yeah. So, and that's another good reason to have, I mean, that's another reason I love playing this game is because you get a good group of people together, and having a well-balanced group is always going to be important.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of ode to the tabletop RPGs.
Yeah,
like
absolutely. You want a good balance of players.
Yeah.
A good balance of characters, and you want players that can play those characters.
It is a party of characters. If you've ever played, what's the tabletop RPG? The Cthulhu, Call of Cthulhu.
Mm-hmm.
The Call of Cthulhu game, obviously not exactly a 1-for-1, but it gives a very similar feel to Betrayal.
Oh, yeah. Call of Cthulhu is designed to be more of a horror-esque,
more realistic. It uses D6s.
It's a lot grittier. There's weird things happening that attacks your sanity.
Yeah.
Sanity is a stat in Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah. It's such... And honestly, we've played Call of Cthulhu a couple of times. Definitely not my favorite RPG, but
I would say it's probably my second or third.
Right.
So when I think of RPGs, I like to have a good favorite for like a different mix of things. And if I want something kind of grittier and, like I said, more horror-esque,
it's gonna be
Call of Cthulhu is top tier.
Yeah.
When I want something high fantasy and
it's gonna be D&D.
it's Dungeons and Dragons or it's Pathfinder.
Yep.
Right. Those are the two good options.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about phase 2. So as you're going around phase 1, you're collecting these omens, and they're, again, spooky things. Like there's like a skull, and there's like a Book of the Dead. Weird stuff like that.
You can find a key or a locket.
And as you're going, like, imagining yourself in this mansion going around finding these things, most of these things are super, super spooky, right?
Most of them.
And so
not all of them. There's a dog as an omen.
The dog is a little spooky, and if he happens to be the reason for the haunt, you're facing off against a werewolf or something.
Yeah.
Or turns out that he's been burying bodies in the backyard or something. Yeah. But anyway, you're finding these omens, and then, of course, like we mentioned, you're making these haunt rolls, and eventually the haunt roll is going to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And that omen is kind of locked in as the reason this place has been so spooky all along.
Right. And so leading into phase 2, during phase 1, like we mentioned, you're collecting weapons and omens, and those don't go away in phase 2.
No, not usually.
Those actually become vital tools in your survival during phase 2, because it could be, we've mentioned it a few times, it could be anything as simple as this person has gone crazy and is trying to kill us all, to this person is trying to raise
an army of the dead.
And we've got to face off against 13 freaking zombies.
Or Medusa just wandered in the house.
Medusa wandered in. Kraken is in the basement.
You're fighting clones of yourself.
There's all sorts of haunts. And phase 2 is where the game really gets... I want to say fun. Gritty is the word.
So
the game is always fun.
There is an air of anticipation in phase 1. Phase 1 is all about trying to get to phase 2.
Yeah.
Phase 2 is where the game really happens. Like Connor said, you want to prepare for it. You want to have the resources to be able to get through it. But it's all about, is it starting? Is it starting? Is it time to start playing the freaky game?
Every time you find a tile with an omen on it, is it time?
And every time you flip over a tile, you're like, is it an omen?
Yeah. There's always that air of anticipation. It creeps along your back until it's just like, Yeah. Everybody's excited for the haunt, even though you shouldn't be excited for a haunt.
But it is a game. That's the point of the game. Everyone wants to play the game.
Yeah. And even though it does have some darker themes to it, I think it still plays in a fairly light manner, making it a very family-friendly game as well.
Yeah. Definitely, I think there are some themes in some of the haunts that I think should be maybe age-restricted depending on the maturity of people that you want to play with.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's pretty flexible. And honestly, I would not mind playing this with a 6 and a 7-year-old. because I know that it is a somewhat colorful board game.
Yeah.
And as they go along, from my experience, and I might get some hate down in the comments, but from my experience, playing with like my nieces and stuff, not this, but other games, honestly like D&D, they have a hell of a time when it's time to start stabbing giant spiders or
it's just fun.
It is fun. It is fun. They really get into it, and they don't seem to grasp the horror concept of it. It's like, oh, okay, well, this is me, and I have to go beat up monsters. What a cool thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, some of the haunts I would definitely double check before inviting younger players to the table.
Which is fair. Like, there's always, I mean, I don't remember what the actual age recommendation is on this game. I mean, vet the games that you introduce to your children, obviously. No information?
Not on the bottom of the box. It's probably in the book.
Is it right there on the front? It is 12 plus.
Oh, cool. Okay, the game recommends at least 12 years old, which puts it right in line with movies that are PG-13. It's kind of in that same category.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, like, there are parents that are a little less restrictive with those PG-13 guidelines.
Or I think more importantly, when we say PG-13, it's parental guidance is recommended for people under 13. Right. It's the same thing here. If you're going to invite younger people to the table, make sure that they're mature adults that are going to help in case there's any questions or concerns about things that come up. And again, if you're inviting those younger people to the table, make sure you take a glance through what's coming up. And let's say that because a big part of the game is mystery. You don't want to go reading through all the horror stories beforehand. That kind of ruins half the fun. Not recommending that. But if you decide to invite younger players to the table, you start playing, you jump into the haunt, make sure to take a glance at what that scenario is. And if it feels appropriate, fine, perfect, go with it. And if it feels inappropriate,
maybe just skip that haunt and move on to the next one.
Right. Or be like, okay, well,
or we're gonna
this one's not okay. We're gonna pretend like this roll didn't count. We're gonna keep playing for a little bit, and on the next roll, maybe it's time to start.
Right. Like we said, vet the game. I mean, honestly, when my daughter gets probably 6, 7, 8 years old, this is not a game I would mind playing with her.
Yeah.
As long as you explain that, it is a game, that nothing's, I mean, there are kids that have an active imagination.
I could be wrong. I'm not remembering anything sexual in this game.
No, nothing like that.
It's not a sexual game. Obviously, like we've been saying, it is a horror genre game.
It's more about the horror and the stuff that could come up.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, we're not worried about, there's no sexual rating. There's no sexual rating on this game. There's no profanity written into the game, obviously. Some players, when they're startled, they might say whatever. Be careful with that. But there's no sexual stuff in here. There's no profanity. There's a little bit of gore. And
there can be.
And obviously there's a little bit of like horror monsters and stuff. Those are the only things you really want to watch out for.
Yeah, those are really the only themes to keep your eye on.
Yeah, and when I say take a look at what haunt is coming up, I'm specifically saying check for gore. Because there's a few of those that involve gore, and there are some that just... Well, most of them just don't even acknowledge it.
If there is gore in the story, it's very few and far between. Yeah. There's not a lot.
That's the other thing is, even if you come up on those,
you can skip over it.
You can skip the haunt, or you can just verbally not.
That's what I'm saying. You skip over the gore.
Yeah, just don't verbalize it, and maybe recolor it as something else.
Yeah. Be a little creative.
The only other hiccup that I would keep an eye out for with young players is, since there's a chance that any one of the characters could become a betrayer, there's a separate booklet of instructions for betrayers.
Right.
Make sure that they have a comfortable reading level.
Yeah.
Because if they're going to be put in that role, they need to be able to understand what their instructions are and what their goal is moving forward.
And of course, if you're going to pull this out at a family game night, not necessarily would we recommend that. It is family friendly mostly, but as Charles mentioned, there has to be a comfortable level of reading as far as being the betrayer. So maybe if you're going to play with a group and you're going to have little kids playing with you, maybe have one person, one trusted adult that's willing to step into the other room to kind of help them work their way through it, because sometimes these haunts do require a little bit of finesse or critical thinking.
Yeah. One other option, I don't know what's available to you at your tables, but if there's maybe someone that's not very interested in playing the game, like they're okay with the idea of it, but they don't feel like playing, that is an adult. Maybe it's something that they'd be interested in just sitting aside in case one of the younger players,
helping the younger players,
and then if that younger player becomes a betrayer, then you kind of tag team the situation, and they're both kind of stepping in and helping out.
There's always options, and part of the reason we do this podcast is we want gaming to be available to as many people as possible. We want to introduce you to new games. We want to explain some of our favorite games. We're looking to expand this hobby to as many people as we can.
Absolutely.
So if we can include the little ones, we're going to include the little ones.
In
obviously,
situations.
Right. Inappropriate. That's why I said if we can, then we will. Obviously, what you do at your table and in your friend group is completely up to you. Yeah. You do you. You do your own. We're just here to provide recommendations.
Now, of course, I am not the creator of this game. I've not talked to the creators of this game. But from my perspective, I believe this game, full disclosure, was created with a target audience in mind of older teenagers and young adults. Definitely.
That's definitely the target audience.
The style, the rule set is all designed for people in that age group and their mentality.
But don't get us wrong. Like, we're both almost 30, and we still come back to this game regularly.
Yeah.
Like, it is a great game to continue to come back to.
Yeah, no, we're definitely not. I'm definitely not saying that don't play this game if you're 50. Like, if you like playing board games and you like playing weird board games, sure.
I don't know if I would even call it a weird board game. Like, it's just a good board game.
It's horror genre. All horror genre is weird.
It's fair, I guess.
It's not Monopoly.
It's you always come back to Monopoly.
Well, it's gonna be a running joke now.
Obviously. Anyways, okay, so we had a rant about kids and family friendly. Let's go back, and we've covered phase 1, we've covered phase 2 pretty much in depth. Let's go back to the actual design of the game. It's something we haven't really talked to. I was going
to run through the conclusion real fast.
Okay. Design. Let's run conclusion and then we'll go to design.
Yeah, so phase 2, like we said, usually there's a betrayer, sometimes there's not, but either way there is a conflict that must be resolved. And there are 2 very distinct outcomes, and it can go either way every single time. Either the main group loses, and maybe that means that they're all destroyed, or they're stuck in the mansion forever with no hope of escape, or they succeed, and light at the end of the night, and they're able to finally escape the mansion. They can get out through the front door.
Yeah.
But definitely the way the phase 2 is set up, it could go either way every single time.
Yeah. Especially with this PvP type play in the second phase, there's always a coin and it's going to depend on your strategy as players. Right. It's going to depend on the haunt as a whole, because a lot of the time, like, not all of the haunts are balanced. Some are very heavy on making it to where the players are going to win. Some are more likely that the betrayer is going to win.
And then even then, it depends on what items have been picked up and what's just available in the situation.
Yeah.
This book does come with 3 instruction books, 3 rule books. There's one general book, and then there's a book for what's called the survivors. Those are anyone that's not turned into a betrayer. And then there's also a betrayer instruction book. Both of those books are kept secret until the haunt starts.
Yeah.
And just depending on the situation, like it's designed so the betrayer could definitely win if they play their cards right.
Yeah. It's not a one and done type of game where there's a very clear victory at the end.
Yeah, even starting phase 2, you have absolutely no idea. I can't tell you how many times I was the betrayer. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all this cool stuff I'm getting. There's no way they have a chance. And then you guys pull some crap out of your butts, and I get screwed over, or flip it around. Sometimes we're playing as the survivors. We're like, we got all this good stuff. The mansion isn't very big. They don't have a lot of places to go.
And then the betrayer comes out and is like, I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take this, and I'm going to get this tile, this tile, this tile. And you're just like, what is happening?
Yeah.
But I guess a little bit more about what I was mentioning before when I say there's no clear end to it. And
there's no clear who's going to be the victor.
Right. But even comparing it, you like to bring up Monopoly so much. Monopoly has a very clear goal at the end. Have the most money. Whoever has the most money at the end of the game wins. This game plays so differently with every haunt that you never know what the end goal is going to be until the haunt is revealed.
Yeah.
And even sometimes as a survivor, you get this book and you read your role in what's happening and you have no idea what the betrayer's end goal is, even up until the very end of the game.
Yeah.
Like, there's times, and thinking of one game in particular, you were the betrayer, and you were just, every time you would take a turn, you were placing things on the board, you were moving things around, and everybody was just like, what is happening? What are you doing? You're just like, wouldn't you like to know?
Yeah. When you're a survivor, your first assumption is that the betrayer's goal is to destroy you.
Yeah, that's the first.
And there's a good chunk of those haunts in there where that's just not the situation.
No, they're very much trying to conquer or achieve a goal that's not killing all of the survivors.
Yeah, like, honestly, it's more frequent than I would expect that the betrayer's only goal is to uncover a specific room and go there.
Yeah.
It's like, what? That is such a simple and easy goal. And the entire time, the survivors, all they're trying to do is stop you. And they don't even know if they can stop you because they don't know what your powers are. They don't know what your objective is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was talking about, is like, this is the end goal on every haunt is so different.
Yeah.
And it makes that's something else that makes the game so replayable. Is because even if you know what the haunt is, even if you as players know what your goal is, you may not have any idea what the goal of the betrayer is until they've already done it.
I can't emphasize enough how disappointed I am when we were playing Betrayal and we pick up a haunt that we've already played 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of the fun and the mystery out of it. When I'm like, okay, this is his goal. This is how I stop it. Obviously, there's still a little bit of head-to-head, especially if you're playing with the same group over and over again. Because, yes, I know what your objective is. You've got your strategies to trying to come in and, do whatever you want to do. But you also know what our goal is in regards to stopping you, because sometimes the goal in stopping the betrayer changes drastically. It's not always just destroy the betrayer. It's,
there's one haunt exactly. That's where I was about to go. There's one haunt in particular where the betrayer is doing their own thing, and all of the survivors are trying to uncover rooms in order to figure out who the betrayer's real name is.
Yeah, like a Rumpelstiltskin kind of situation.
Right. And so not only are you like, okay, we're just going to... So when we've played that before, the survivors were just like, we're going to do our own thing because we have something that we desperately need to do.
Yeah.
Which in turn just left you and your followers free to roam and do your own thing, which is kind of where strategy comes in a little bit.
It really changes the timetable in situations like that. Yeah. Because I know that you know what you're trying to do, so I've got to hurry up and finish my thing because you are beelining for success. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I'm a little bit disappointed. I feel my heart sink just a little bit when we get repeat haunts. But everything is random
still
and it can
fun.
happen. It is still fun. It is still fun.
I get where you're coming from.
It's a lower degree of fun.
It's always more fun when it's a new haunt because you don't know what's going on. You don't know what the other people are doing.
Oh, speaking of, and I know this is maybe a little bit off topic, it's still Betrayal. What I mentioned that first edition had an expansion that brought in like another 50 haunts. Another thing that they brought in is a super haunt that I've always wanted to play, but the problem is that because of how random the game is, it's so unlikely that you get it. And the way that you get the super haunt is you have to have previously played 6 other specific haunts, and if you've played those haunts and this specific situation comes up, then instead you're in the super haunt.
Yeah. It's very specific to get into that super haunt. And that would be something that would be way fun. But like you mentioned,
to get all those random situations to come up.
Yeah. It would almost be like running a story-based campaign.
Right.
But a different story every time you play a game.
Right. So yeah, let's talk about design.
Yeah, let's talk about the design. Obviously, like just from the front of the box, this game, like the design of this game is thematic and gorgeous. It's colorful in a way that makes it to where it's almost creepy.
It definitely uses shading properly to convey that effect. Yes, it is very colorful, but because of the way the shadows are situated, you can tell there's just this overwhelming gloom on the situation.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, you do start with 3 individual tiles. The tiles in this game, and I'm just going to pull this out real quick.
So the main tile that you start on is actually a triple tile. It has 3 locations on it that you can move in between. The next tile is like the upstairs main landing, and you can
you have an upstairs landing and a basement landing.
So the main tile, the main floor, one of those 3 rooms that you can go into is a staircase that'll get you up to the main floor.
Yeah, so if you move on to the ground floor staircase, that can take you up to the upper landing.
Mm-hmm.
The only way to get into the basement landing is through certain tiles.
Right. So there is no initial way to get into the basement, but you may find a room where there's a giant hole in the floor that'll throw you down to the basement, or we were talking about a magical elevator earlier that just goes up and down and around, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory kind of crazy magic elevators. Or maybe you just find the laundry chute.
Right? Yeah. But as you can see from the tile, the tiles are colorful. They are thematic.
The edges are all dark. The centers are lit up. It definitely it gives you a sense on every single tile that, okay, there's something important that I need to do, but there's something creepy trying to wrap its fingers around.
Right. Me. And for those that are actually watching the video, I'm going to try to get this to zoom in just a little bit. Hopefully that's not blurry, but just to give some of the detail on these tiles, like there are light bulbs and there are doorways and there are doors and carpet. Like you looking at these, you feel like you've stepped into a fancy, dark, creepy mansion.
Yeah, definitely.
And it just gives ode to what we mentioned earlier about how you feel like you're in the story.
Yeah. And then as far as your characters are concerned, so like I mentioned earlier, you do have like character sheet cards. They are pentagons. They are double-sided because you can play one character on one side or a different character on the other side. But then each of these also comes with a standee as well. There is a miniature to go with each card.
So it doesn't necessarily match the card I pulled out, but
it matches this one.
Yeah.
So there is a little girl card, right? And there's one little girl on the other side. Her name is Isa Valencia. And there's a different girl on the other side. Her name is Anita Hernandez. But they would both use the same miniature of a little girl holding a flashlight.
And the way this game is designed is just brilliant because so each miniature has their own colored base that matches the color around the edge of their character card. So it's super easy to see who you are on the board because you're just looking for a colored base.
But on top of that, the miniature is just so detailed as well.
Yeah, the miniatures are insanely detailed. Like I would almost use this as like a Dungeons and Dragons mini if I needed to.
Right.
Like this little girl has a headset on, is holding a flashlight, and even has design on her t-shirt. Hopefully that's not too blurry for those of you watching video, but there's little details on our shirt that stand out that kind of convey who this character is. And each character is very unique in how they play and who they play as. Each card is pretty funny. So Charles was mentioning names a little bit earlier, but these cards also have their age, their birth date, any hobbies that they're interested in, and just a fun little fact about them. For the characters that Charles was mentioning earlier, Isa Valencia is 11, born on March 30th, is her hobbies include depressing music and vlogging.
Yeah.
And she owns 8 Poe collections, as in Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And then the other side, Anita Hernandez, is 12 years old, born on June 11th, has hobbies of taxidermy and painting, and then has 17 animal friends.
That's weird.
Just fun little facts to kind of help you understand who these characters are as you're playing.
But so going back to the miniatures just for a second, one thing that floors me every time I look at these is it is simultaneously so detailed, but also could fit into both characters so easily.
Yeah, it's vague enough that it could represent both characters, but specific enough that it's still detailed and you know who you're playing as.
So I keep bringing up the priest. Again, I play the priest pretty frequently. Connor likes to play Broski.
I love playing Broski.
Brosif. Broski.
Joseph Brosif.
Yeah. Anyway, so the priest is 71 years old, and the flip on his tile is a doctor that's 60 years old, right? So initially we're like, okay, well, I mean, they could look kind of the same, sure. But if you just look at the images on the tile, that's the other thing.
They're very
the tiles
different.
give you pictures of the people.
Yeah, just like portraits from like shoulder height up to kind of give you a detailed image of who this person is that you're playing as.
But I mean, so the priest obviously looks elderly, but the doctor, because he's a doctor, even though he's 60, he looks like he's in very good health. The standee has glasses on. They both have glasses. He's wearing some kind of coat or robe or something. It could be, a priestly robe, or it could be a lab coat.
Right.
And he's holding a book. Is that book a Bible, or is that a medical journal?
Right.
It could go either way.
Yeah. Yeah. The design, the thought that goes into the design of this game, that had to have gone into the design of this game, is actually really, really good. It's like they had to have put in a lot of thought. I mean, obviously we're sitting here with 3rd edition, but 1st edition wasn't much different.
No, yeah,
as far as the design.
Very similar. I would say the only difference in design that I've seen in this game is that there are a couple of variations that don't fit into like the main grouping of Betrayal. And when I say variations, I mean I also own Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, which is made in the same style and by the same people. And it's literally the exact same game, but they've changed so many minor details about it that now it's a story that you can find in the D&D world.
Yeah. Speaking of Betrayal alternatives, I think I'm going to try to find it. I think it was on Facebook.
Okay.
I should have snatched it up
while
I had the chance. Pretty sure it was a Scooby-Doo version of Betrayal.
Very thematic.
It is very thematic, and I saw it, and I think the only reason I didn't snatch it up is because it was like in Utah or something.
Oh, sure.
But I think that's a alternative version of Betrayal that I really want to find.
Right.
Because that would be so cool.
That'd be good.
to play some of the old school haunts from the original Scooby-Doo, like the Black Knight Ghost or Minor 49er, that would be cool.
That would be fun. That'd be fun for sure. But yeah, no, there's a few different variations out there, and obviously it's one of our back of the mind goals to collect several, if not all of them. Because just between the two variations, we do own the classic version and Baldur's Gate. The playstyles, again, are so similar, but they have such unique differences that it really is a new game. Honestly, I prefer Baldur's Gate a little bit more. I like the theming better than walking around a haunted mansion.
Yeah.
So Baldur's Gate plays that instead of going up and down in this mansion, instead you're exploring these streets of Baldur's Gate. And sometimes you're inside and sometimes you're outside, and maybe you go down into the sewers.
Yep.
And instead of, ghosts and ghouls attacking you when the haunt starts, instead a dragon is attacking town, or a mind flayer is coming and is taken over one of your companions to do his bidding. Or maybe someone really was just that sneaky, backstabby rogue the whole time that was just trying to get an edge.
It is very thematic, and honestly, that's a version that we should probably pull out more. We pull out normal Betrayal quite a bit, but I mean, obviously, we have a D&D group. I'm sure all of it. I know you and I very much enjoy the Baldur's Gate version. And I know at least majority of our party would love to get into Betrayal of Baldur's Gate.
Well, and that's the other nice thing about getting variations of this game. It adds more haunt options. So you have a better chance of finding something you've never played. So let's say that I've played the standard version 30 times and I've hit, maybe 25 of the haunts. So I've got a pretty good chance of getting a new haunt when I play again. But Baldur's Gate has 50 and I've only played 5 times. I've got a better chance of getting a new haunt.
Absolutely true.
And then we go and buy the Scooby-Doo version and we played none of those haunts. So the first time we play, it's going to be brand new. The next time we play, we're almost definitely going to get a new haunt. Just keep the new stories rolling.
Right. I mean, obviously, like we talk about how much we enjoy gaming and how we're board game enthusiasts. So when we do get it really into a game, it's expansions and alternatives, and we want to fill an entire shelf just with one game because it's a game that we enjoy so much.
Probably about half of our favorite games. So we have, everyone has a list of their favorite games, if it's board games or if it's puzzle games or card games or whatever. As far as our board games go, on our top 10 list of board games that we love to play, about half of those we have a ridiculous number of expansions for.
Yeah. I mean, so you've got Betrayal, where we've got at least 3 versions at this point. First edition, third edition, and Betrayal.
4. So we've got first, third, and Baldur's, but I also have first expansion.
I was considering expansion.
I get that, but because it adds 50 new haunts.
That's true.
Yeah.
We've got the game like Dice Throne, which each box is its own version. Like they're all expansions.
Yeah, like we've got 5 boxes.
Yeah.
Connor's not as big into Monopoly as I am, but I've got...
Charles has several versions of Monopoly.
I think I've got 8 or 9 different versions of Monopoly.
Yeah. We get into one game and it's like...
Why not?
This game is amazing. How else can I play it?
Or the DC Deck Builder. That's another one of our favorite games, and we've got, I think, 5 expansions on that.
I've got
ways to play.
3, I think.
I've got 3.
So we've got 6. Harry Potter, the deck building game. I've got the main game,
as well. I've got the full set on that. The problem with Pathfinder that I'm running into is that they've got different overarching scenarios, and I know this is very off topic for this video, but
it's a podcast.
The box set that I have, and you picked up the exact same box set, is Rise of the Rune Lords.
Yep.
Right, and that's got 6, 7.
Honestly, 8. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
It's got several different expansions inside of it. But Pathfinders has actually put out different box sets. Rise of the Rune Lords is not the only scenario path.
Oh dang!
There's 3 or 4 of them that I am aware of. There might be more.
So you not only have the base box and then all of the expansions, so you can complete that story, and then there's at least 3 other stories.
Yeah, and that's my problem, because just getting all of Rise of the Rune Lords cost me like $150. So I'm not super eager to jump into a new one until I've finally taken the time to finish
the original, right? Which is totally understandable. Obviously, I'm constantly keeping an eye out for good deals on Dice Throne, because that is a game that we play regularly, and not one character has gone unplayed.
Villainous.
Villainous is another really good one.
Yeah, you've got probably 5, 6 of the Disney.
So I've got Disney, and I might be missing 1 expansion. I've got at least 4, probably 5.
I've got 3 of the Marvel Villainous. You've got the exact same 3 Marvel, and then I've also got the Star Wars. I think they just came out with an expansion for it, but I've got the first one that they came out with Star Wars.
Right. I know I have more expansions to buy for Villainous, but that's another really good game that we got into. I bought the base game. We played it once and decided this game is amazing. Let's buy everything.
Let's get some variety in here.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to, is variety. We find one game, and obviously, you play one game for so long, you're going to run out of the excitement.
Right.
You throw in the variety, and you can keep playing that game for who knows how long, if it's ever going to get stale.
Exactly.
And that's... I think those are the games that we enjoy the most. That's one reason why I really want to get into the Everdell expansions.
Yeah.
Because Everdell is a really good game. I want to know how the expansions add to it.
Absolutely. When I look at a game like Everdell, my first assumption is that an expansion is going to add almost nothing because the game is already so full. But looking at the expansions they have, they are so unique. I don't know how you could add more to that game, but they did it.
Yeah, yeah. And not only do the expansions add to the game, they add to the game board.
Right.
Anything else about Betrayal that you want to cover before we sign off?
No, it's, again, one of our top favorite games, something we keep going back to over and over again. If you're even loosely interested in the horror genre or in the concept of discovery and internal conflicts, this is a game you want to check out.
It is. If you're interested in storytelling games, and like Charles mentioned at the beginning of the video, this game is not hard to get into. There is a rule book. You do have to sit down and learn how to play, but once you've learned how to play this game once, it is fairly easy to sit down and continue playing.
It is.
I don't think I have anything else either. With that, I think we will call it for the episode.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on our podcast today. Make sure to come back to Escape the Board like once a week at least, whether or not we've added anything new. Just come and watch our videos over and over again. We
would very much appreciate it. If you have any questions about Betrayal specifically, make sure to leave it down in the comments or the show notes, wherever you're watching this. Because we will be sure to follow up with you, whether it's through a message or a TikTok or something. We'll make sure to answer any questions we get. We'll try to leave a link to this game down in the show notes. We've still got some stuff to work out before we're able to start doing that. Hopefully by the time you get to this episode, hopefully by the time this episode is released, there will be a link down in the comments if you're interested in picking it up. Until next time, make sure you're escaping all the boredom. We'll see you soon.